Well, good evening to everyone from Kathmandu. Of course, I would like to say good afternoon and good morning as well, as our discussions are joining us from different parts of the world. My name is Lakshman Dutt Pant. I lead an organization called Media Action Nepal. We work for the promotion of freedom of press and safety of media workers. Also, we are working across different districts of Nepal, reminding journalists about their duties and responsibilities. So to make the media profession accountable, I have been long engaged in media teaching and research, remained a visiting faculty of media and journalism in countries of the Southeast Asia and South Asia, including Nepal. Uh, Today, we are here to discuss about the media ethics as the essential professional journalism. This is the 18th episode of the Communication Talk organized by Communication Club based in Dhaka. I'm thankful to the organizers for providing me this opportunity to moderate the session on media ethics as the essence of professional journalism. And we are joined by four distinguished panelists. Uh, Dr. Gifty Apia Ajay, she is the lecturer of communication and media studies at the University of Education, Winneba in Ghana. We have with us Professor Pristuline Yas Suyat from the College of Communication at the Polytechnic University of the Philippines in Philippines. We also have Dr. Jeffrey Lane Blevins, a professor and head of journalism, College of Arts and Science from the University of Cincinnati, USA. He is also the editor of Democratic Communique. And we also have Professor Saba Uddin Hadjialik. He is the head of journalism and communication science faculty in a university in Rome. After this short introduction of our discussions today, I would like to start with a few questions to all of our panelists, but I will start with the general observation about our discussions today. As there are questions across media fraternity, media industry, from the general public and the different sections of our society, including experts in other than media, that the credibility of journalism alongside the business interest, the political interest, and the absence of professionalism in media outlets have been questioned. And we have a lot many questions around to discuss about, but I would like to start with a very general overview of what are the school of thoughts that are guiding at the moment in different part of the world as the media ethics. I would like to start with Professor Pristoline Suyat. How do you observe the state of media ethics across media? What are the key factors that are affecting today's professional journalism? Over to you, Pristoline Suyat.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Sir Laxman. Thank you for having me here in this forum. Basically, the issues in media ethics in the world are it is questioned about the credibility of media. Is media ethics still relevant in different parts of the world, particularly during this pandemic? Is media can practice these principles that we uphold in the practice and in the conduct of our responsibilities as journalists. As one of the professors in the Philippines aptly said, that providing information is the fundamental expression of media responsibility. Having said that, however, it must be emphasized that the discharge of that responsibility requires adherence to established professional ethical standards, which include fairness, humanness, factual, contextual accuracy, relevance, and impartiality. There are many questions that are being heard against us that is media continue to practice this responsibility. How about the function it must perform when many people, including our readers, our audience, are questioning the responsibility that we are performing? The challenges that we are facing is that these principles, these ethical standards that we must uphold and practice are being eroded because there are many questions about issues of biases, issues of malpractices, misinformation, and disinformation that are being heard against our colleagues in media, in the media industry. But I think it is still important that we should uphold these ethical standards and principles because it is the utmost responsibility that this task of truth telling, of giving the informations that our people need, especially during the pandemics, are really needed. No, it's very important that the people should know the basic information that we are facing now, that we are having the economic and political crisis in the different parts of the world, and that media ethics can perform, no? It can contribute in the performance of our duties as journalists and media practitioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pristolijn. I would like to listen some idea from Professor Sabahuddin Hajialic.
Hajialic. Yes, Sabahuddin Hajialic.
Do you agree that alongside economic and political, problems around the world, the ethics of media, has been, in question? And what are the key driving forces that journalists or media professionals are not able to abide by, media ethics? Over to
First
you.
of all, thank you. I would like to say that I'm honored to be the part of this forum today and to meet distinguished colleagues from around the continents around the world. First of all, I would like to say a few words about the announcement for today's forum. You remember the sentence, professional journalism always maintains the ethical standards. Sorry, the word always creates problem. No, it is not that professional journalism always maintains the ethical standards. As our distinguished colleague from Philippines said, it's linked also with the political, economical, and professional interest of the journalist as well. And at the same time, when we talk about professional journalism and ethical standards, everybody remembers the case of Kevin Costner back in 1994, the Pulitzer Prize winner who did a suicide after being caught because of his professionalism to show the world the photos from the war. So please, we have to focus because it's the same around the world. Everywhere everything is the same. When we talk about avocation, professional standards, explanation regard the essence of the ethics. Ethics is moral judgment towards moral virtues of professional journalism, meet responsibilities in media. Then we can go and talk about economy, media, ethical questions, etc. Because ethics is the branch of philosophy which deals with moral components of human life. As we all know, ethics is the science about morality. But we have the morals around the world differs. Something what's moral in Saudi Arabia, it's not immoral. It's not moral in states or everywhere else, and vice versa. That is why ethics very often describes as agglomerate of principle or as codex of moral behavior. Our conscience, we have to understand this, is telling us, even when the professional journalism is questioned, very often brutally clear way, that there is a significant difference between the acts that are accurate ones and the acts that are wrong. Knowing ethical principles and the facts from which it has been derived can make influence on our behavior. When, for example, professional journalists anywhere dive into someone's life, their decision to publish, and it's very often unpleasant details, they justify people's right to know, especially in this horrible pandemic that's going on, because of the established social networks, fake news that goes all around the world, because of the so-called anti-vaxxers and everything. Until this comes to their own home, they can't see the problem. That's why there is one very important thing that I wrote in my book, Media Ethics and Media Literacy, The Only Way Out, published in States 2 years ago by Eurasia Review, when I said that most important thing is the media literacy, critical thinking about everything, especially in professional journalism. For example, as we said, many people think that the media are inaccurate and biased, as our colleague also just recently mentioned. Just remember Robert Maxwell case has open issue of media ownership as well. Questions of censorship also exist in today's world. The dissemination of discussion of information concerning the major problems of the world and its people face is necessary to both the democratic understanding and democratic action, without which the problems cannot be solved, without which, in fact, they will escalate. Who mentioned COVID-19? It escalates for almost 1 year. Ethics is not just a matter of codes of conduct, not just a matter of rules to be followed. It's more to do with the principles concerning the rights and wrongs of human conduct. Principles which have some reasoned theoretical basis and which therefore apply objectivity and impartiality. Remember, freedom, democracy, truth, objectivity, honesty, and privacy. 5 criterions represent basic of any kind of ethical system. And if we follow that, we will become real respect towards professional journalism. I think that's enough for the beginning from my side.
Well, thank you, Professor Sabahuddin. My follow-up question to you before I move to Gifty. Is there any meeting point for the countries across the world, despite the fact that there are different political philosophies and economies around, as you were referring that media ethics or professionalism and their practices may be different because of the socio-political economic setup of the world. Do we agree upon a set of media ethics or professional standards that could apply to the global media practices? Very quickly,
Yes. We have, for example, for the Association of Journalists of European, American Association of Journalists, they have the set of codes which will follow up the professional journalism in the world. Just to tell you, ethics, there is no difference in ethics. There is only difference with the moral approach towards the ethics, because ethics is one, the truth is one. But there is another issue. When we come, for example, during the war, everybody say God is on our sides. For the God's sake, how the hell the God can be on all sides? That's it. That's where ethics jumps. Ethics and the truth. And we have to fight for it. As I said, freedom, democracy, truth, objectivity, honesty, and privacy. That's general for the world. Only local issues, certain local issues in regards, but professional journalism approach is what I just said. Only that.
Well, thank you, Professor Sabahuddin. We have with us Gifty Appiah Ajay from the University of Education, Department of Communication. Gifty, how do you see the status of media ethics in your continent? And is there ground at a time that there is diversity and there is diversity of opinions, diversity of the political situation across the world? Do you see ground for a common standards of journalism across the world? Over to you, Gifty.
All right. Thanks, Laxman, and thanks for this opportunity. I strongly believe that yes, ethics is very crucial to professionalism, so far as the journalism practice is concerned, and it is crucial to the practice in all jurisdictions. Yes, we may have some differences, like socio-political context may vary depending on jurisdictions, but I strongly believe that despite the differences in the socio-political context of all jurisdictions, now more than ever, ethics is very crucial when it comes to professionalism of the journalism practice. Now, this is because there is no doubt about the fact that effective and efficient practice of journalism lies basically in the principles of ethical values. Now, the world is confronted with a situation where credibility of a journalism practice is being questioned, and it is because now we are confronted with a situation where everybody, and I mean everybody in quotes, can be a journalist. Okay, now coming from the African context, for example, you realize that in our fight to do away with authoritarian regimes and stuff like that, we have a situation whereby we want to make entry into the journalism practice as free as possible, so that anybody who has anything to say can say it. However, the problem now lies with the fact that due to technological innovations, now many people are creating their own content and they are sharing their own content. And because they don't have the training, and they don't even, excuse me to say this, but some may not even understand the essence of being ethical when it comes to creating and disseminating content. Anybody just puts together a piece of information without ensuring that he or she is cross-checking and double-checking to make sure that he's providing accurate information to the audience. And you see, we in Africa, we prefer self-regulation than state regulation or regulation from the government, because that gives the government the room to try to control the media. And that is one thing that we are trying to avoid. And therefore, we prefer self-regulation than state regulation. And as a result of that, you realize that, like Prof said, ethics is more or less like moral obligation. So journalists who have the training know that they have the moral obligation to make sure that they are producing accurate and truthful information to their audience. But what about the citizen journalists out there who don't have the training? What about those who just want to disseminate the information for dissemination's sake? They don't care about the consequences that comes with just putting that information into the public domain. And we are confronted with a choice of either ensuring that we make our system open or free, so that there is no control from the state or from officials, okay? And therefore, since we don't want that, we have no choice than to opt for self-regulation. And that is where the challenge is, because it makes the system open to anybody to come in and then create and disseminate information. And that is where the credibility of the journalism practice is being questioned, because so far as somebody is creating the information and disseminating it, they know that this is journalism. You see, and it makes it difficult to differentiate between a trained journalist and a citizen journalist, or somebody who is not trained.
Well, Gifty, thank you for your opening remarks. I will have a up question to you, but I now would like to go with Professor Jeffrey. Professor Jeffrey, how do you see the connection between ethics and business and media? As Gifty was saying that ethical standards have been eroded due to the absence of media literacy, and everyone coming to the media profession, the profession itself has not been regarded as a profession. So it is difficult for journalists to follow the ethical standards that have been, as Professor Sabahuddin was referring to some of the organizations in the United States that have set up with the standards in journalism. Do you see what is the meeting point? Because now with the investment of billions of rupees, of billions of dollars across the world, now many conglomerates coming to the media, and they are claiming that now there exists media industry. So what could be the meeting point between media ethics and business? Does media ethics exist alongside the businesses? Professor Jeffrey, over to you.
Sure, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. This is great to be a part of this group, and thank you for doing this in English language. I am probably the only monolingual on our panel here, so I appreciate that very much. Thank you. To get back to the question, I think we have two forces that are putting pressure on the media industry. One is technical, and one is political and economic. And to build off what Gifty was saying, she's right in that everyone thinks that they are a journalist now because they have the technology. Consumer technology allows us all to live stream. We all have great tools to produce journalism, but not everyone has the same ethical grounding or the training in journalism to carry that out. The second force that we have is a political and economic one. And here's where I'm not sure that ethics and business are necessarily going to produce an answer that we want. Also going off of what Gifty said, in the US, we tend to prefer self-regulation as well. Government is seen as, suspicious. You don't want, government control over media, where that has been a gift for a while. I think it's also created a bit of a problem in that, some of our core principles, like, a marketplace of ideas, if you have all sorts of speech, all sorts of voices, whether it's trained journalists or citizen journalists or just anyone else, that would be, for the best. And the assumption is that we will all recognize the truth when it's reported, but that's not really the case. That there is so much disinformation, misinformation out there that I think most audiences can't really distinguish between professional journalism and someone with a political opinion these days. Plus, in the US, we're coming off of a presidential administration for the past 4 years and a political movement that, routinely demonized the press, saying that we were the enemy of the people. So there are, certainly political forces behind that, but economic ones as well. And that is, I think it's for journalists to try to fix it. I think part of it is kind of outside of our control. I think we really have a crisis over truth and how we produce knowledge and how we understand it.
Thank you, Professor Jeffrey. I'd like to go with Professor Prestoline Shriyat. You were mentioning the particular reference of the COVID-19 context, that how media engaged disseminating information that is not up to the public's interest or demand, as you were referring. disinformation or misleading information in media. Are there particular techniques that journalists in the newsrooms need to know to prevent disinformation or misleading information, so to protect the core values of media ethics? Over to you, Professor Prestolijn.
Thank you, Sir Raxman. There is always no shortcut in processing data or information in journalism. We must always assert that in our function and our task of truth-telling, we must always strive to get this information. I know there are many difficulties now during the pandemic to set appointments, conduct interviews, to gather information through different techniques. But the issue is assertion. No? We journalists must double our efforts to get this information. There is always a question that our sources are dictating their agenda, their news agenda. They want to tell us their narratives, their information, and how we should discuss this to the public. But in the context of media ethics, we must always play the role of watchdog, the fiscalizers, as the fourth estate, as producers of change in our society. In the performance of these duties, we must always, or it is imperative for us to perform this as a social responsibility. Truth-telling always dictates upon us to perform our duties with utmost professionalism. It must always with this conduct or adherence of the highest practice of ethical and professional standards and principles. While there are many difficulties and challenges that we are facing during the pandemic, we must not be tempted to shortcut the processes in gathering information and sharing this information to the public. We must always ensure that we will not fail the tasks given to us, delegated to us, because in this situation where political and economic crisis abound because of this pandemic, we must always ensure that the truth will always prevail, and that the economic interests or the political interests of our people in different countries are also upheld. And this must always be the utmost responsibility of our colleagues in media now, in the media industry. And this practice must always be upheld and be given importance in our performance of our duties.
Well, thank you, Professor Prestolijn. You touched upon so many interesting issues, but important one is that of the social responsibility, also alongside watchdog role of media. Professor Sabauddin, how do you see the role of media as a watchdog? Also, the media ethics. There are criticism, there are critics that often question the role of media, that now media has turned into lapdog instead of watchdog. And the idea of, media ethics is somehow, it is utopia, it's not the reality. What is your observation about the newsroom realities sticking to the principles of media ethics, and also watching upon the wrongdoings of the state and non-state actors in power? Over to you, Professor Sabauddin.
Yes, I have experience because I worked in a country that was one-party system, and they've almost arrested me 30 years ago because of my articles at that time against that regime. But also in today's regimes, which is currently in the country which I'm originally from, Bosnia and Herzegovina, from Yugoslavia, it's also there is no difference. They just change the dresses. And I usually say, who is the worse than a communist? Former communists. So another thing, it's very good thing that you that colleague from Philippines mentioned is this issue of watchdog. I think that social media has made us possible to join deliberative democracy, but being a lack of critical understandings of it, being lack of media literacy, just to continue what Gifty mentioned as well, is the problem that we have to enter this into the schools. From the primary school, 8th or 9th grade of primary school, we have to enter. I'm fighting for that around the world. This should be a United Nations goal to enter the media literacy into the curriculum, because by that we will avoid all future problems about citizen journalism as well. I would disagree with respect to a colleague from Philippines about the watchdog. There are no watchdogs anymore. You know why? Because in today's world, everybody is a journalist, like Gifty mentioned. But at the same time, we have, as much as we can, we have a responsibility to be the positive controller as the media, with the people with ethics, established ethics within ourselves, to be the positive controller what's going on towards the final consumer. Because in today's world, everybody is a media. The Marshall McLuhan's 50 years ago, when he said that, currently right now, we are all the media. Whoever has an iPod or everything can do everything what he wants. One-man band is on the run. But also at the same time, we have a government, as you said, dear Laxman, we have governments around the world. This is ideal position for the dictatorships around the world, for the manipulation without people who has no sense what ethics means. For example, I always talk in examples. Maybe you don't know the country. Now I'm in Sarajevo, but I teach in Rome. 73 deaths in a country of 3.3 million people in Sarajevo. And they don't have empathy. I have my own formula, which I usually teach. I say, rights equal responsibility in journalism as well. Responsibility equal empathy, empathy equal equality. This can be practiced in every point of human behavior, especially in professional journalism. And having in mind the government, they would like always to manipulate with the numbers. They would like to manipulate because of their lack of knowledge, ignorance. You can see it in your own country. Okay, after 6 months, 9 months with the COVID issue, we didn't know anything about the disease. But after 9 months, if somebody comes and say we cannot order the vaccines, he should be replaced. He should resign. Somebody who can should stop on it. With the help of journalists, also with the help of professional journalists, who will explain the people, not to be the watchdog, who will be explainers, who will explain the people what is really going on with critical thinking, because manipulation is going on in general. I usually say about against those anti-vaxxers, what they are doing. Recently in Belgrade, they were dancing, 3,000 people were dancing, protesting against the COVID measures. And 14 days from now, half of them will be sick probably of COVID-19. Because people has a lack of media literacy in general, and journalists as well. And also we don't need to forget copy-paste journalism. This is copy-paste journalism. You laugh and you know that I'm telling the truth, because today's world, there's on one portal, wrong information on one portal. Immediately, 100 other portals with copy-paste without checking.
Yep.
This is where
Professor
ethics comes
Saba,
from.
with many interesting issues you're sharing with us, I will come back to you, but you raised two important points that, at time when everyone is claiming to be journalist, along with the emergence of the idea of citizen journalist, it would be difficult for one to have media ethics, sticking to the media ethics. But at the same time, you also raised the idea of including in the school and university courses, that of the media literacy part. Gifty, how do you see the situation of, citizen journalist and the quote unquote, or in our context, so-called professional journalist? Is it possible for one to impose journalist ethics, or media ethics, or code of conduct to all claiming to be journalists? Do you think that there should be a the difference or demarcation point between professional journalist and the citizen journalist? How do you see this, Gifty?
Yeah, thank you, Laxman. But it is not as simple as you see it, because we are dealing with a very complex situation. Now, I am saying this because if we should show some kind of demarcation where we classify some journalists as professional journalists and others as not being professional journalists, trust me, the politicians will use that to manipulate the system and get away with it. Because it's like, if we have that demarcation where we classify some people as being trained journalists and some as not being trained journalists, then when somebody who is not a trained journalist is chances upon a story and then brings it out, then it is going to give the politicians the power to run down whatever the person is saying, with the excuse that you don't even have what it takes to be a journalist. So why are you coming out with this kind of information? I hope you get the point that I'm making. So I personally, I am of the view that, like Prof said, it is basically about media literacy. Using media literacy from the primary through to the university, it exposes everybody to critical thinking skills, where you don't consume information for consuming sake, but you analyze it critically to determine whether the information that you are about to consume is the correct information or not. Now, the challenge is that if we are going to have media literacy as a course, or from primary through to the university, then definitely it is the politicians who control our educational system and all that. And trust me, the political will won't be there, because the politician knows that when everybody is media literate, it is to their disadvantage. So the political will to ensure that media literacy is taught right from the primary school through to the university is implemented, it will be a challenge. I know in some jurisdiction, it wouldn't be a problem doing that. I think in the UK and in the US and other states already, there are moves to do that. But if you come to the African context, let me use my university as an example. I introduce my students to media literacy. I introduce them to fake news and ways of detecting fake news when I am putting together my course outline. You get the point? But the thing is that you realize that it is not common to all the universities. And we are training journalists to go out there and produce information for the populace who are not media literate. So if you, the journalist who is going to produce that information, you are not media literate yourself, then how can you go out there, critically analyze information and make sure that you are being a truth speaker or a truth reporter? So Laxman, personally, I am of the view that, and I will support what Prof just said. I think the best way out is media literacy right from the primary through to the university, so that by the time you are independent enough to consume information on your own, you have the skill that enables you to critically analyze information, to detect whether that information that you are exposed to is the truth or not. Because we have so many misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation in the system.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you, Gifty. Very interesting insights you shared, seconding Professor Sabahuddin's ideas as well. Coming to Professor Jeffrey, you have been long engaged with the university, and I believe you are updated with how university or school courses are being prepared in relations to these issues, especially that of media literacy course. How do you compare the school or university courses, alongside discussions about disinformation or media ethics issues? Often people from other than media background, they tend to comment upon, the media content. This is not appropriate. This is not up to the market expectation. So what needs to be considered while, introducing these critical issues of making media more credible at time of the market pressure, industry pressure, political pressures, media division alongside so many political, lines. What are your suggestions to the universities or schools, and what needs to be included as making the masses literate? Over to you, Professor Jeffrey.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with Sabahuddin and Gifty that media literacy has to start a lot earlier, before you get to the university, because so much of our habits of thinking are established by then. But certainly, I think that a critical media literacy course should be a general education requirement for all university students. That it's not isolated to just a topics course in media, because we are all, media consumers. We've all been media consumers for a while. And as we've been discussing here, we're also all media producers. And so there should be some critical thought put into that as well. But, so many young people are producing, their own media at such an early age, whether it's TikTok videos, and the likes. They've already have, their platform. One thing that I think journalists could do, though, to help, and this applies to us in education as well, is to be careful about the terms we use to describe ourselves. That we can't let ourselves be conflated with just the media or communication or even storytellers, which is kind of a very popular term in the U.S., which, it's a way that other journalists will compliment each other. It's like, wow, that was a very compelling, story. That was how you put it together. But also in the US, the term storyteller has a negative connotation. It means someone who has trouble telling the truth, someone who lies. And so I think we need to be a little more restrained in terms of, that we are specific about calling ourselves journalists or reporters, and to be careful about some really bad habits, I think, that we have fallen into at times, as Sabahuddin was saying, of the cut and paste journalist, or simply reporting that another outlet is reporting something. Well, if they've reported it, that's enough. You don't necessarily need to repeat it unless you have verified it yourself. Also, we have to think about how we represent ourselves in our social media. That one thing I think that audience likes about that is that they get some more personal engagement with journalists, but it's also a way in which we can show our own biases and the like, and that will erode credibility. So I think we have to be a little more guarded in that sense.
Well, thank you, Professor Jeffrey. I have a follow-up question to you before I move to other speakers, Professor Jeffrey. You know, often journalists or say the editorial bosses, at least in this part of the world, South Asia, Southeast Asia, the developing world, you know, they do not tend to accept the errors or blunders they do, you know. And there is a huge criticism of the ombudsman kind of thing, or say media or press council kind of things. So when these institutions are there to remind them of media ethics or code of conduct, media often, we have seen through some studies here in Nepal as well, media often or editorial rooms often come to challenge the institutions themselves. What could be the appropriate or acceptable modality of self-regulation?
Yeah, well, this is where I feel like kind of the business pressures really conflict with the ethical ones, because journalism should be seen as a public service, and in some respects, that's how it used to be in the U.S. Even in broadcast television. That was, it was considered part of your duty as a public trustee, is for free, and so you were supposed to produce news as a part of that. However, it has all become considered to be, you need to make a profit. And the newsrooms are no longer subsidized by the entertainment divisions of broadcast news networks. Same thing goes for newspapers and online media. And so, we have seen, newsrooms cut to where you have just, a core group of reporters and, an editor, but you don't have the same amount of eyes that are reading stories, fact checking. You're expected to do more with less because you're expected to turn a profit. And unless we start to really value journalism as an institution, and through some type of public support, I don't know that that's going to change. If the goal is to turn a profit, that's just not always conducive with good reporting.
Well, thank you, Professor Jeffrey. Professor Sabahuddin, do you think that in any pretext, say that of the deadline, or moral pressures, or say business pressure, or say political protections, the international standards that you were mentioning at the beginning, and it is much talked around universities among prospective journalists, that of the standards earlier set up by the American Society of Newspaper Editors. Then they came in the form of Journalist Code of Conduct, later by the UNESCO and several organizations like International Federation of Journalists. Can excuse be given to journalists or reporters or practitioners in any pretext, that of the political pressure or deadline pressures, or any type of affiliation?
Unfortunately, the real professional journalism, the real professional journalist with a deep respect to the ethics cannot allow him or herself to do like that. Why? Because what's going to happen to the world if we all have pretext? If we all will say, okay, let's forget it, we're going to talk about it later. We are here to inform the public, but also very often to form public opinion. If we are ethical persons, we will have them, of course, literate people. We will help them to be channelized towards the real proper ethical issues. When we talk about deadlines and everything, real professional with equipped with the knowledge doesn't care about the deadline. I usually, when I talk for the certain conferences, I just ask, just give me the deadline. I just, because we all know that we have a deadline. If you are not really professional, if you are, for example, waiting for the last minute to do something, that's not professionalism. Because all the work is 70% preparation, 30% is execution. That's why I am against the pretext. I'm for the real approach towards journalism, especially at university. I know with my students in Italy, in Poland, anywhere I teach, or what I do ethically when I enter the classroom is I would like you to prove me that I'm wrong. Out 10 of them, one of them will immediately jump up, would like to discuss. But the problem is when it comes to defend the thesis. And our goal is always as professors, all of you knows, until the end of semester to learn, to teach them with existing knowledge to be able to defend their thesis. This is the real professional journalism, especially in media ethics.
Well, we have very little time to listen to your very interesting insights. I'm coming with you with the final questions, starting from Professor Presteline Sriat. Your final thoughts. How can we balance the professionalism plus all these at the beginning you were mentioning that of these pressures, including that of the socio-economic pressure at time of the pandemic at the moment. Very quickly, Presteline.
I think we hold power to account. In the performance of our duties as journalists, we must also check and balance the abuses existing in our society and in government. Media ethics is a very difficult task to uphold, but our credibility is always questioned when we cannot perform our duties as I have said earlier, that it is a social responsibility. If we cannot perform in our performance of truth-telling, then we failed in our responsibility of expressing and providing the truth that our people need in their decision making. Especially now that during the pandemic that our people or our countrymen are experiencing difficulties, media ethics must be practiced at the highest level. No? It must also be a driving force for us journalists to express that there is always something to fight for. We must struggle to make the causes of different groups in improving our society, in providing the truth in many issues that we are confronting in our communities. The professional journalists today must always confront the issues of accountability, of being useful in the society and in the world. We cannot profess our function or our task as journalists if we cannot provide meaningful change, not only in our country but in the world. So that is a challenge for us journalists. Media ethics is a big responsibility to profess and to uphold, but I know journalists can do it, and it can be exercised with performing the difficult function of truth-telling in our society.
Well, thank you, Professor Presteline. You highlighted on journalists or media persons being accountable. Gifty, what are your final thoughts, especially how journalists could be responsible towards the content they write, ultimately making themselves accountable to uphold the principles of both media freedom and accountability? Gifty, very quickly.
All right, Laxman, I am of the view that journalists are aware of ethics, and they know that it is moral obligation. But coming from my context, you realize that there are so many challenges in the system that that gives journalists the yardstick to get away with some of these ethical breaches. Therefore, if we really need journalists to be ethical in order to safeguard the journalism practice, then there is the need for us to address these challenges right from the source. Other than that, it is just going to be a talk shop, because we all talk about the fact that they should be professional, they need to adhere to ethical standards and all that. They know that, but they are not doing that. Why? There are some challenges out there. And I strongly believe that if we really want to address the issue, then we need to go to the sources of the problem. Let me give you a typical example. For instance, in Ghana, you realize that most of the ethical breaches has links to do with financial independence. Most of the media houses are not financially independent. And as a result of that, they breach these ethical principles just like that. And when you are looking, reality is staring at you in the face that this is the problem. For instance, we find ourselves in a system where media ownership determines how much they are going to pay the journalists. In Ghana, we don't have structures in place that determines that journalists with these qualifications should be paid this amount. So it is left with the media owner to determine how much he or she wants to pay you. And trust me, always they are not well paid. And if you are not paying them well, then definitely you make them vulnerable to financial inducement. And they are ready to come out with a skewed version of a story because they have been induced. So if we really want to address this issue, then we should go to the source and solve it in a realistic manner and forget about these talk shops. It's not going to work if we don't address it at the source. Thank you.
Thank you, Gifty. You raised very valid point and the reality as well. In Nepal, we do have a committee called Minimum Wage Fixation Committee, and there are journalists appointed every 2 years by the politicians or the ministers. They are journalists actually, the politically affiliated journalists. And as 2 days ago only, 28 journalists with one of the reputed media outlets, they resigned, and they called it their resignation as the forceful resignation. The editor asked them to resign, citing that his boss, the publisher, has asked him to, ask them to resign. And many journalists throughout this pandemic here in Nepal, as per our study, the organization I engage with, Media Action Nepal, also this study by Federation of Nepali Journalists, that yes, 5,000 plus journalists in this country, some or other way left their professions. And, media industry in Nepal making profits, and they are claiming to be media industry, and but they are, hesitant to pay tax. So there are many issues that needs to be discussed, maybe in some other opportunities as well. But I'm seeking very final thoughts and very quickly from Professor Jeffrey, then finally from Professor Sabahuddin on these cross-cutting issues. Over to you, Professor Jeffrey.
Sure. Well, I think Gifty made a very good case about being independent. And so I will leave that there. The other things I have to say are easier said than done, because it's not easy being independent, because we all have to eat. We all have, we need, food and clothing, and, we have to live. So we're going to have to be willing to work really, really hard, perhaps harder than, we should have to, and we're going to have to be fearless as well. These are not easy things. It's not for everyone, which is something that I tell journalism students, that this isn't for everyone. And if it's not for you, that's okay. But then support good journalism, be an ally.
Yes.
Thank you,
as,
Professor Jeffrey. Professor Sabahuddin, how do journalists or media houses, how can they maintain good journalism, as Professor Jeffrey was indicating? Very quickly.
If I may say, the problem is how to recognize ethical dilemma when they are faced with. And that's why good journalism, good professional journalism will know how to do it. And especially when they are approached to ethical dilemma in any case. But the issue is, because you just left me for the end, let's say last but not least, is the problem how we understand the ethics. People with critical thinking knows what the ethics means. And it's, I'm hardly saying, but it's 5% in the world. 95% are easily to be manipulated.
Well, thank you, Professor Sabahuddin, and of course all of you for joining this discussion organized by the Communication Club in Dhaka.
If I may just say, just one sentence, please. When Professor Jeffrey said support journalism, I was journalist. I was working radio, TV, press, and everything until age of 30. Then I went to the academics. So I'm now helping the journalists as much as I can.
That is a good combination, you know the realities. Anyway, thanks to all of you. You shared with very enlightening ideas from different part of the world, and I would like to thank all of you for joining us. And I'm also thankful to the organizers in Bangladesh. I'm based in Kathmandu in Nepal, and I'm also thankful to Gifty for joining us in last minutes. I requested organizers to have an expert, not necessarily a female, but we need some perspectives, understanding all genders, their roles, participation and everything. So thanks to the organizers. I think they are not around, but I take this opportunity to wrap up the show. There are so many interesting political, economy, the pandemic-induced situation, business interest, but also the idea of citizen journalism, media literacy, disinformation, misleading information, and also analysis on part of the readers, and journalists not agreeing upon what readers say. And sometimes there are questions on part of journalists. They say that, who are you to teach me ethics and all? So there are so many interesting issues across the world. And thank you for joining this wonderful panel. I'm really enlightened. I would be in touch with you for more discussions ahead. Thank you and have a good day. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.